The skies above Earth were black with ash and fire. Cities once lit by neon and steel now burned red under the pitiless glare of Apokolips, its looming shape dominating the heavens. Fire pits belched choking smoke across the void. Vast armadas of warships drifted like vultures, raining death upon the planet below. Metropolis had become a slaughter ground. Towers were toppled, the seas boiled, and entire continents burned. Swarms of Parademons swept over every nation, hunting survivors, dragging millions into screaming chains to feed Darkseid's war machine. Humanity fought back with weapons, with courage, with defiance. But they had failed. The war was lost, but not yet finished. In the ruins of the Hall of Justice, the League gathered one last time. The once proud chamber was now cracked and shattered, its insignia broken into jagged shards that lay scattered across the marble floor. Statues of heroes past lay in ruins. The world's greatest defenders, gods and mortals alike, stood bloodied and battered. Superman leaned against a crumbling column, his cape in tatters, his chest plate cracked, the S barely visible beneath soot and blood. His eyes glowed faintly with stubborn fire, but his breath was ragged. Wonder Woman's golden armor was fractured, her lasso was frayed, her shield dented nearly beyond recognition. Her sword had already broken in battle. Only a jagged fragment remained, still clutched in her hand. Batman was worse. His armor was cracked, cape shredded, ribs broken beneath the plates. One eye glowed dimly through a cracked lens. The other was missing. He leaned heavily on his staff, his mind working feverishly even as his body failed. The others, Cyborg, bleeding sparks and oil from torn plating, the Flash limping, Green Lantern, his rings sputtering from exhaustion. Aquaman stood with his trident snapped, gashes running across his arms. They all stood in grim silence. Only Dr. Fate still shone with an otherworldly power, though even his helm was cracked, golden light leaking through the fractures like blood from a wound. "This world is gone," Aquaman rasped, staring out through the broken wall at the burning horizon. "Atlantis is ash beneath the waves. The oceans are dead." "We're all that's left," Flash whispered, shaking with exhaustion. Superman straightened, grimacing through cracked ribs. "Then we fight. We've always fought, even when the odds were impossible. That hasn't changed." "No," Batman growled, his voice low and cold. "It has changed. This isn't a war. It's extinction. If we do not find a way to remove Apokolips itself, Earth falls. The galaxy falls." They all turned to Cyborg and Fate. Cyborg's systems flickered weakly, sparks trailing from broken servos. His voice was strained, but determined. "I've been running simulations. The mother box can still channel enough energy to open a boom tube. We could send the planet away." Dr. Fate lifted his fractured helm, golden eyes burning from beneath. "Cyborg is correct, but I can weave a spell around his machine. Together we can open a passage, not to another point in space, but another reality. We can cast Apokolips from this universe entirely." Lantern clenched his fist. How far? As far as existence allows, Fate said. Apokolips would be trapped beyond our reach, beyond his. It'll cost us, Cyborg muttered. A lot. The energy drain will fry me, maybe worse. Fate won't survive the backlash. And Earth? Wonder Woman asked. Fate hesitated. The Earth will burn regardless, but humanity might endure. If Apokolips is gone, the Parademons lose their master. They scatter. It may be enough. Batman's jaw tightened. Then it's decided. We make the play, no matter the cost. The floor shook violently, stone splitting, dust raining from above. A shadow fell across the chamber, vast and unyielding. Darkseid had come. The walls burst inward, fire and rubble cascading as the Lord of Apokolips stepped through the smoke. His towering form seemed carved from stone. His skin was ridged and burning with power. His eyes burning red with the glow of Omega beams, barely restrained. His armor gleamed black and gold, unscarred by battle. Behind him, Parademons poured in, their shrieks filling the ruined hall. You persist, Darkseid's voice rumbled, deep and resonant, as though the earth itself spoke. Broken, defeated, and still you resist inevitability. Admirable, but futile. Superman staggered forward, fists clenched. This isn't your world, Darkseid. It never will be. Darkseid's lip curled into the faintest smirk. All worlds are mine. The League surged into battle one last time. The Flash blurred into motion, striking Parademons down in a whirlwind of speed, even as his injured leg buckled with every step. John Stewart summoned shields and cannons of emerald light, blasting holes through the swarm. Aquaman hurled the shattered haft of his trident like a spear, impaling 3 Parademons in one throw. Wonder Woman leapt, shattering the skull of a war beast with a single strike, her broken blade cutting through steel and flesh alike. Batman fought with precision, every strike calculated, every move lethal despite his injuries. And Superman hurled himself at Darkseid, the two titans colliding in a thunderous impact that cracked the very foundations of the earth. Their clash was apocalyptic. Each blow from Superman shook mountains. Each counter from Darkseid shattered the ground beneath them. Omega beams carved molten scars across the ruins, while Superman's heat vision blazed against them in defiance. Darkseid caught Superman by the throat, crushing, unyielding. You are strong, Kryptonian, but strength means nothing before inevitability. Superman's voice was a growl, blood on his lips. Let's test that theory. He drove his fist into Darkseid's jaw, cracking stone, drawing the faintest hint of blood. Darkseid's eyes blazed brighter. So be it. While the gods clashed, Cyborg and Fate worked desperately. The Mother Box screamed with power, circuits burning, the air vibrating with reality itself tearing apart. Fate chanted in a language older than creation, golden symbols spinning around him in patterns of light. A rift tore open above the chamber, a boom tube, but unlike any seen before. Its edges flickered with unstable energy, spiraling outward, widening until it threatened to consume everything. Cyborg screamed as energy tore through his systems, sparks and blood flying. Fate staggered, helm shattering, light pouring from his body as the spell consumed him. The chamber shook violently. "It's working," Cyborg roared. "We're pulling Apokolips in." But something was wrong. The tube widened too far, stretching not across space, but across worlds. Fate's voice cracked with panic. "It's unstable. I can't hold it for long." "Then finish it," Batman bellowed. "Do it." Darkseid sensed it instantly. His gaze snapped upward, Omega beams flaring as he realized the truth. "No," he snarled, his voice echoing with fury. "You cannot banish me like this. I am eternal." He unleashed his full power, beams of raw annihilation tearing into the fabric of reality itself, trying to destroy the portal. Superman tackled him again, forcing the beams away. The two titans crashed into the ground, locked in desperate combat as the boom tube expanded, swallowing the burning planet. Parademons screamed as they were pulled upward, their wings snapping, dragged screaming into the void. Their warships shuddered, drawn into the rift, engines imploding as they were consumed. Apokolips itself trembled, pulled through the tear in existence, its fire pits roaring higher as the entire planet was dragged into the storm. The League watched in silence as the spell consumed them, golden light filling the chamber. "Clark," Batman rasped, eyes meeting Superman across the chaos. "No matter what comes, don't stop fighting." Superman's reply was drowned in light, and then the Earth was gone. The Hall of Justice collapsed into dust, swallowed by fire and ash. The heroes vanished in white light, consumed by the spell's backlash. Only Apokolips remained. The fiery planet tore through the boom tube, burning like a newborn sun, and emerged screaming into a new sky. Its fire pits lit the darkness, casting a hellish light across alien worlds. Armadas of warships drifted in its orbit, dragged across realities. The cries of a billion enslaved souls echoed in the burning atmosphere. Darkseid stood atop the citadel of Apokolips, his gaze lifting to this new cosmos. He saw the Astronomicon blazing in the warp like a false star. He saw alien constellations, unfamiliar worlds, and the faint flicker of endless life. A smile crept across his lips. "This universe shall kneel," he whispered, his Omega eyes burning brighter than ever before. The skies above the sector were wrong. At first, Imperial augurs registered the incoming mass as an asteroid storm. Then the readings changed. The void itself seemed to recoil as a dark tide of fire burst into being. Warships, like monstrous carrion beasts, surrounding a planet that was not supposed to exist. Apokolips hung in space like a wound in reality, fire pits glowing like eyes of hell, its silhouette bleeding warp fire into the starless sea. From its furnaces came the first wave, vast swarms of parademons boiled out of docking bays like locusts erupting from a carcass. Their wings beat with iron and membrane, their shrieks tearing through vox channels and shorting auspex readings. They flew in disciplined waves, millions of them, each with talons sharp as adamantine and weapons forged for slaughter. Darkseid stood upon the balcony of his citadel, hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. Beneath him, molten rivers churned through the crust of Apokolips, carrying screams with their heat. "Go," he murmured. "Spread. Test this universe. Let it know fear." His swarm obeyed. The first to suffer was Barathis Secundus, an Imperium border world of no particular note. Its hive-cities were bleak towers of rust and smoke, its surface scarred by endless manufactoria. Its only claim to value was its forges, which churned out lasguns and tanks to fuel 1,000 wars for the Imperium. On the day the swarm arrived, the skies of Barathis were clear. The shift bells of manufactoria were toiling as workers marched into the endless factories. The world's PDF regiments drilled in their barracks, accustomed to boredom and routine, not actual war. But then the shadow fell. The swarm of parademons blotted out the sun. Wings as vast as the horizon beat the sky into a storm of ash. Vox networks screamed with static as towers fried under the psychic presence of Apokolips itself. The first strikes were surgical. Warships in orbit rained fire upon the planetary defense batteries, silencing them before a single shot could be returned. Then the Parademons descended. The Imperial Guard of Barathis, known locally as the Iron Barons, were first to meet the assault. They mustered in ranks outside Hive Garros, a fortress of steel and spires built into the mountains. Thousands of guardsmen formed up in parade ground lines, lasguns armed, tanks and basilisks clanking into place. Their officers barked orders with vox-amplified voices, their faith in the Emperor steady, their courage absolute. They expected heretics, orcs maybe, even tyrannids. They were not ready for this. The sky split open with shrieks as the parademons descended in their millions. Taloned wings tore through the clouds, casting shadows that devoured the light. The guard opened fire, ranks of lasguns stabbing upward in red fury. Basilisks roared, their shells bursting among the swarm, ripping scores of parademons to pieces in thunderous gouts of flame and shrapnel. Hydroflak tanks screamed into life, their cannons scything into the sky, shredding hundreds more. Parademons died in droves, their bodies rained down like meteorites, wings shredded, torsos blown apart. But for every 100 that fell, 1,000 more descended. They struck the guard like a living storm. The first wave crashed into the forward trenches, talons tearing through armor and flesh. Guardsmen screamed as they were dragged into the air, torn apart, or hurled back into their comrades. Whole squads vanished in seconds. "Hold the line," Commissar Haldros bellowed, his bolt pistol roaring, his voice cutting through the chaos. He shot a parademon through the skull, blood spraying across his coat, then drove his power sword into another's chest as it lunged for him. Around him, men fired wildly into the skies, their lasbeams stitching red scars across the black storm. But the parademons were too many. They dove upon the tanks, talons ripping open hatches, pulling the screaming crew into the air. One Leman Russ vanished beneath a tide of leathery wings. Its turret was torn off by sheer mass. Basilisks fired point blank into the swarm, taking scores with them. before being buried in bodies. The guards' firepower was terrible, but the swarm was endless. Inside Hive-Garros, the defenders fared no better. Parademons smashed through the spires, ripping habblocks open like paper, dragging civilians into the air to be slaves. Manufactoria collapsed as swarms tore through steel supports, sending whole districts crashing into molten fire. The PDF fought street by street, las guns flashing, autocannons rattling from the rooftops, but the Parademons hunted them like predators, striking from above, ripping them apart before they could reload. In the main cathedral, priests of the ecclesiarchy raised their voices in hymns of fire, chanting litanies of the Emperor's wrath. Thousands of civilians knelt in prayer, seeking salvation. The Parademons came through the stained glass in a storm of wings and claws, ripping the congregation apart before the last syllable was uttered. Blood ran down the steps of the altar. Still, the Iron Barons fought on. In the southern trenches, Captain Varos rallied what was left of his regiment. With one arm broken and his uniform soaked in blood, he stood atop the wreck of a chimera, shouting into the din. "For the Emperor, fire until you are empty, then strike until you are broken." His men obeyed. They fired until their barrels melted, then charged with bayonets and combat knives directly into the claws of the beasts. They died screaming, but they bought minutes that saved evac shuttles full of refugees fleeing the hive. In the skies above, a squadron of Valkyries dove, unleashing missile salvos directly into the swarm. Dozens of Parademons were torn apart in blossoms of fire, but seconds later, the swarm enveloped them, ripping wings and engines apart, dragging the burning wrecks into the ground. This was not a battle. It was a storm of annihilation. By nightfall, Hive-Garros was gone. The once mighty spires were broken husks, their ruins smouldering with corpse fires. The Iron Barons were broken, their survivors scattered into the mountains. Civilians were dragged in chains to the orbiting warships, screaming as they vanished into the black maw of Apokolips's war machine. Parademons feasted on the bodies of the dead, their shrieks echoing through the ruins like a hymn of victory. Barathis Secundus, a world of billions, was lost in a single day. From his throne, Darkseid watched. The hollow projections before him showed the planet's fall in exquisite detail. Screaming guardsmen torn apart, tanks consumed, hives burning in fire. His lieutenants reported victory after victory, but Darkseid's expression did not change. His hands remained clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the wider stars beyond. He was not content with one world. He could feel something watching. Not from this galaxy, not from this dimension, but from the storm he had glimpsed upon his arrival. A realm of madness, clawing at reality with infinite hunger. The warp. It pressed against the edges of his mind, whispering, tempting, offering. Other gods lurked there, their voices venom and fire. Darkseid's lips curled faintly into the shadow of a smile. "Gods of another realm," he said softly. I feel your eyes upon me. You hunger, you rage, you beg for worship. But you are not me. His omega eyes glowed like suns, burning through the veil of reality itself. All realities, he murmured, his voice echoing through the citadel. All dimensions, all existence shall kneel. And as Apokolips burned brighter in the void, the warp screamed back. Astropathic screams tore across the void. The death of Barathis Secundus bled into the Imperium like a psychic wound, voices crying out in despair as billions perished in one night. Those cries reached the nearest segmentum fortress, where inquisitors and administratum scribes scoured the garbled transmissions with trembling hands. Not an orc warband, nor a Tyrannid splinter fleet. No heretical uprising. This was something else. The record spoke of wings blotting out the sun, cities torn open from above, a world burned in a single day, and one phrase repeated by the last sane voxcaster before silence consumed them. The shadow of a new god. The word reached Ultramar, and Ultramar responded. Upon the fortress of Hera, Chapter Master Calgar convened his council. It was decided swiftly. The 13th Legion had faced horrors untold, but they would not let nameless predators consume Imperium worlds unchallenged. A single company was dispatched. The Second Company, proud sons of Guilliman, led by Captain Sicarius, the Emperor's chosen. Their mission was simple: retake Barathis Secundus in the name of the Emperor and purge the Xenos infestation to the last claw. The world would be cleansed. The void split with fire as a strike cruiser tore through the system, its silhouette dwarfing the Parademon warships that still prowled the dead planet's orbit. Lances of light scythed through the dark, silencing the lesser craft in seconds. Then the drop pods fell. Dozens of ceramite coffins, burning through the atmosphere like meteors, each one carrying a warrior worth 100 men. Voxcasters on the surface screeched with static as the thunder of re-entry shook the broken hives. Hatches blew open with explosive force, bolters roaring instantly, disciplined volleys slamming mass-reactive death into the nearest Parademon swarms. A dozen were torn apart before their claws had even turned. Chainswords revved, plasma blasters hissed, and storm shields locked into place as the sons of Guilliman marched into the corpse ruins of Hive Garros. Captain Sicarius was first from his pod. His blade glowed with power as it cleaved a Parademon in two. Second Company, he thundered across the Vox. Form ranks. Purge them in the Emperor's name. The reply was gunfire. The Parademons shrieked as they descended, a storm of wings and claws blotting the ash-filled skies. But the Ultramarines were not mortal guardsmen. They were demigods of war, bred and honed for slaughter. Bolters fired in unison, their mass-reactive rounds detonating inside the Xenos bodies, ripping them to chunks of gore mid-flight. A dozen Parademons fell in each volley, wings shredded, ichor splattering across the cracked ferrocrete. Assault Marines leapt into the air, jump packs roaring, slamming chainswords into parademon throats and bisecting their torsos in sprays of black blood. Devastator squads planted their heavy bolters and missile launchers, tearing swaths through the swarms. A crack missile detonated mid-air, vaporizing an entire clutch in a blossom of fire. Pathetic, Sergeant Marius spat as his flamer washed a dozen of the creatures in Prometheum, their shrieks silenced in a curtain of flame. They fall like vermin. The parademons tried to swarm, talons scraping at ceramite, but the Marines fought with unflinching precision. Every strike was a kill, every volley a massacre. "Hold discipline," Sicarius commanded, carving down another beast with a flourish of his blade. "These creatures are weak. Strike hard, strike fast, and drive them into the dirt." The parademons fell by the hundreds, then by the thousands. Their bodies piled in charred heaps, broken wings littering the ruins like autumn leaves. The sons of Guilliman did not falter, not a single one. Then it changed. The parademons stopped. In mid-air, talons raised for the kill, they froze. Their wings beat once, twice, then folded. The swarm hovered as one, shrieking voices cutting off in unnatural silence. Then, with eerie synchronicity, they descended to the rubble below and knelt. "By the throne," whispered Brother Acastus, his bolter lowering. They kneel. Are they surrendering?" Across the battlefield, the monstrous Xenos bent their heads, claws pressed to the earth as though in worship. The air thickened, heavy with a presence that pressed against every Astartes' soul. Vox traffic filled with confused curses, prayers, and growled demands for targets. Sicarius's visor swept the ruins, his eyes narrowing. "Something's coming," he muttered, and then the world tore open. A thunderclap split the sky, a wound of fire and light ripped into existence, a vertical storm of energy blazing in the center of the ruined plaza. The fabric of reality howled, Vox units screeched with feedback, and the warp itself recoiled. A boom tube opened. Through it came a figure. Darkseid. He stepped into the broken hive as though onto a palace floor, hands behind his back, his face carved from stone, regal, immovable. His red eyes smoldered faintly in the gloom. The parademons bowed deeper, their forms trembling in abject reverence. The Ultramarines raised their weapons. "Xenos filth," roared Sicarius, his voice like thunder. "Second Company, strike this abomination down." Bolters roared. Mass reactive rounds slammed into Darkseid's form, detonating with enough force to rip tanks apart. But the god did not flinch. The explosions blossomed across his body like sparks on granite, smoke curling and fading without leaving a mark. Plasma shots hissed against his skin, vanishing in sizzling steam. Crack missiles detonated at his feet, shaking the plaza but leaving him untouched. The sons of Guilliman poured their fury into him, their discipline unbroken, their fury absolute. But Darkseid simply walked forward. "You presume," he said softly, his voice deep as tectonic plates grinding together, "that gods can bleed." His eyes ignited. Twin lances of crimson light blazed forth, then split, bent, curved with impossible precision. They weaved through the battlefield like serpents of pure annihilation. Brother Cassian ducked behind a wrecked rhino. The beams turned in midair, slamming through his cover, spiraling around his shield, and burned through his chest. He screamed once before disintegrating into dust. Another beam snaked upward, piercing a flying assault marine midair, burning him to cinders before his body hit the ground. A third twisted between cover, hunting its prey, until it caught 3 devastators in one arc, reducing them to nothing but smoking armor husks. The Ultramarines fought with all their fury. Chainswords bit, Melter Blast roared, but nothing touched him. The Omega beams hunted them relentlessly, each Marine screaming defiance until his voice was cut short in agony and fire. One by one they fell. Sicarius charged, blade raised, roaring Guilliman's name. Darkseid did not move. The beams lanced forth, spiraling around the captain's guard, piercing his chest and burning him to dust mid-swing. His sword clattered to the ground, glowing dimly. The plaza fell silent, a company of the Emperor's finest, reduced to ash and ruin in a matter of seconds. Only one remained. Brother Leonis, bloodied and scarred. He dragged himself upright amid the corpses of his brothers. His bolter was gone, his helmet cracked. Still he stood, spitting blood onto the cracked stone, staring defiantly up at the giant. Darkseid loomed over him. Slowly, he reached down and tore the Marine's helmet away. Leonis snarled, meeting his gaze with the fire of Ultramar in his eyes. Darkseid studied him in silence, then a faint curl upon his lips. You are different. The words rumbled like distant thunder. His vast hand closed around Leonis, lifting him effortlessly from the ground. The Marine roared and struck at him, but his fists might as well have battered a mountain. Darkseid turned. The boom tube still roared behind him, its light bathing the plaza in warped brilliance. Without a word, he carried Leonis back through it. The fire and screams of Barathis faded. The air grew hotter, fouler, choked with smoke and iron. Rivers of magma glowed below, furnaces stretching into infinity. Towers of black metal rose like the teeth of hell itself. Apokolips. Darkseid walked the iron bridges of his world. The broken Ultramarine clutched in his hand. At the gates of his citadel, a withered figure awaited. Darkseid, twisted master of torment, bowed low as his master approached. "My lord," he hissed, voice like oil. "You bring me a gift." Darkseid dropped Leonis onto the metal floor. The Marine coughed blood, still glaring up at them with unbroken hate. "Study him," Darkseid commanded, his voice absolute. "This one is unlike the other humans. His flesh carries strength. His will does not break. I would know why." Darkseid's lips stretched into a grin of knives. "Oh, I will peel him apart, my master. Bone, blood, soul. I will find what makes him burn so brightly." Darkseid's eyes smoldered, gazing out across the endless furnaces. "Good, for this galaxy will kneel, Darkseid, and I will know its champions before I crush them." The screams of the Marine echoed through the citadel as the doors closed, and Apokolips burned. The galaxy bled. World after world burned in silence, their cries smothered by choking wings and smouldering skies. The parademon fleets poured across the void like a tide of iron locusts, descending on isolated planets, orbital colonies, and undefended outposts. Their method was always the same. First came the fire from above, orbital strikes that cracked hives, burning oceans to steam, splitting forests into kindling. Then the swarms descended, millions of leathery wings screaming through the atmosphere, claws slamming through hubs, manufactoria, cathedrals. The defenders, guardsmen, PDF, even scattered Astartes fought bravely, but bravery could not match inevitability. For every parademon that fell, 10 more took its place, and where the soldiers broke, the civilians were spared, not from mercy, but from purpose. Chains, cages, endless columns of broken men, women, and children marched into the black ships. Their fates were the same. The furnaces of Apokolips hungered. Entire populations were carted away, dragged screaming into the forges to fuel Darkseid's engines of war. Some were fed into factories, their labour spent until their bodies collapsed. Others were experimented upon by Darkseid, their blood, bone and spirit carved apart in search of something greater. And so the galaxy's strength was turned against itself. The Imperium screamed for order. Astropaths bled themselves raw, sending warnings, but the warp was thick with distortion, the cries lost in the storm of terror. Armies gathered, fleets turned, but the nightmare spread faster than any response. Darkseid watched, silent, his hands clasped behind his back as world after world was marked on his holomaps. But then, resistance, not from man, but from the orcs. The world of Drakthar 9 was nothing special. It was a mining world, its surface riddled with pits and smelters, its skies choked with ash. The parademons descended as they had on dozens before. The PDF were crushed within hours, the survivors chained, and victory was assured. But beneath the mines, something stirred. A war. Green bodies poured from the depths like a flood, bellowing war cries that split the sky. Sluggers roared, choppers hacked, stick bombs rattled. Their numbers were endless, their laughter deafening, their joy of battle absolute. The parademons screamed as they descended, claws raking, wings blotting the sun. The orcs met them in mid-air, grappling them from the sky, tearing their wings from sockets and smashing their skulls with crude hammers. "Look at these weird birds," laughed Big Mech Drozgrub, firing his custom Mega Blaster into a shrieking parademon and watching it explode into ichor. "They've got wings, but we've got the Daka." A tide of boys surged forward, smashing into the swarm. Bolters had failed before, lasguns had failed before, but orc brute strength would not. A knob tore a parademon in half with his bare hands, roaring as blood splattered across his face. A warboss slammed a claw the size of a tank through a cluster, hurling their twitching bodies into the pits. Shooters filled the air with leaden storms, shredding leathery wings into ribbons. The parademons fought with savagery, They clawed through mobs. They carried orcs screaming into the skies, ripped flesh from bone. But where one orc fell, 3 more rose in its place, bellowing laughter at the chance for a fight. And the Parademons began to falter. Hours became days, hive after hive filled with the corpses of both Xenos. But the orcs did not break. They reveled. They grew stronger, louder, more united in their war. At last the skies cleared. Piles of green and black corpses burned together in pyres that lit the night sky. The orcs stood triumphant. Warboss Gorgut's Skullcrumper raised his claw high, dragging a Parademon's head from its spine, and roared to the stars. That was a good scrap, boys. But these ones aren't like the others. They've got wings. They've got claws. They've got something else. I like it. The boys cheered. Already the war grew louder. On Apokolips, the furnaces roared with the labour of billions. Within the obsidian citadel, Kalibak, son of Darkseid, knelt before the throne. "My father," he growled, his voice like grinding stone. "The invasion spreads. Dozens of worlds fall. The chains of man rattle across the forges. But..." Darkseid's eyes shifted. A flicker of red glowed within. "But..." One sector resists. Our forces stalled upon Drakthar 9. Kalibak's fists clenched. "Not from man. It's a different species. Savage. Numerous. They fight not for survival, but for sport." He spat the word like venom. "They revel in the chaos. Even our Parademons are overwhelmed." Darkseid slithered from the shadows, his smile twisted and hungry. "The green ones. I have studied fragments, whispers from the slaves. They are creatures of war, driven by violence alone. Delightful." Darkseid's gaze remained fixed on Kalibak. "And what is your assessment?" Kalibak snarled. "They are vermin, but vermin in number can gnaw even the strongest foundation." Silence filled the hall. Then Darkseid spoke, his voice as cold and vast as space itself. "Then we will test them." He turned his head, his eyes burning brighter. "Darkseid, deploy the first batch." Darkseid's grin widened. "Ah, yes, my lord. The new breed awaits." Drakthar 9 burned. The orcs had claimed it as theirs, raising banners of crude glyphs over the smouldering hives, hammering Parademon's skulls into trophies. Warboss Gorguts sat atop a mountain of corpses, gnawing on raw meat and laughing with his knobs. But the sky was not yet done bleeding. Thunder cracked, fire split the heavens, and the boom tubes opened. Parademons poured forth once more, but not as before. These were larger, stronger, their wings spread wider, their claws sharper, their bodies corded with muscle. Their armor was thicker, their faces twisted mockeries of Astartes. Their veins glowed faintly with an unnatural energy, and their eyes burned. The first of them hit the ground like meteors, cratering the ferrocrete beneath their feet. The orcs roared in delight, charging without hesitation. The battle began. A knob swung his chopper into one of these new creatures, the blade biting deep into its chest. But this parademon did not fall. It roared, its claw snapping the knob's arm from his body in a spray of gore, then crushed his skull like fruit. Another orc slammed a power claw into its gut. The beast staggered, then drove its talons through the orc's throat, lifting him high before tearing him in half. The sky filled with wings once more, but this time the orcs felt the difference. These foes did not fall in droves. They fought with precision, with strength that rivaled even the largest knobs. Their claws ripped through armor, their wings battered mobs aside like ragdolls. The orcs bellowed with laughter, meeting the slaughter with joy. "This is more like it, lads," Warboss Gorguts roared, charging headlong into the fray. His claw slammed into one of these new beasts, tearing its chest open in a shower of blood and ichor. They're getting tougher. But for every one he felled, 3 more landed from the sky. The hives shook. The mines filled with screams. The ground ran slick with green and black blood. The battle raged for days. Neither side gave an inch. And above it all, in the void, Darkseid watched. The battle on Drakthar 9 had sung its siren call. The air, thick with smoke, burned with the acrid scent of singed flesh and molten metal. From the depths of nearby asteroid belts, orbiting colonies and war-torn moons, orcs heard the call, a symphony of slaughter, a chant for blood. They came in droves. The war was no longer a whisper in space. It was a tide, unstoppable, rolling, deafening. Countless green bodies surged through space in crude freighters and gravships, roaring with joy at the smell of combat. War bosses bellowed orders in guttural tongues. Knobs gripped their choppers, slit throats with jagged grins, and raised their claws aloft. Boys jostled for position, laughter ringing over the comms of stolen voxcasters. Every orc who could breathe felt the pull of battle, and none hesitated. By the time the first wave reached the skies of Drakthar 9, the planet was swimming with green bodies in every crater, cave, and slag-ridden plain. The parademons of the new breed sensed them immediately. Larger, faster, stronger, and more cunning than their predecessors, they roared across the ashen skies, their wings blotting the sun, their claws raking the cratered earth. But the orcs were unlike any foe they had faced. They did not fear. They did not falter. They delighted in the slaughter, even their own. The first orc fleet slammed into the parademon swarms like a green hurricane. Gravships disgorged boys directly into the air, leaping with jetpacks, spring-loaded sluggers and their teeth bared. Orc sluggers barked fire into winged beasts, ripping flesh and tendon. Yet the new parademons shrugged off the volleys of bullets and lasfire like it was rain on metal. They landed, tearing orcs from the sky, snapping their limbs, crushing their skulls with talons the size of power fists. Big Mech Drozgrub unleashed his custom Mega Blaster into the sky, cutting swathes through the leathery onslaught. But for every parademon that fell, 2 more took its place. A knob, fists dripping ichor, charged with reckless joy, tearing one of the hybrid beasts apart, only to have another leap upon him mid-scream, clawing his chest open. Yet still, he laughed. Boys surged forward behind him, an unstoppable tide of green fury. For 3 days and 3 nights, the skies above Drakthar 9 roared with wings and war cries. Craters swallowed the dead. Lava choked the ruins. And yet the orcs pressed on, howling in celebration. Each new breed that fell was replaced by another from the boom tubes overhead. Each orc that fell was replaced by 3 more, laughing, grinning, screaming with violent delight. The Parademons were strong, relentless, precise, but the orcs were madness incarnate, unpredictable, and utterly unyielding. Gradually, the orcs began to adapt. Sluggers were rigged with improvised arcane glyphs scavenged from the Imperium dead. Rocket launchers targeted the monsters' wing joints. Knobs coordinated charges into flanks and rear arcs. The first hybrid fell to a combined onslaught of boys, mech guns, and warboss brutality. Wings severed, its body crushed into slag. Then another, then another. Each death fueled the orcs' bloodlust, their war growing louder, brighter, and hungrier. Warboss Gorgut Skullcrumper, atop a mountain of corpses, swung his claw high, shouting orders that carried across the battlefield like lightning. Boys, this is the fight. The green tide rises. Smash these flippin' demons. His roar was a command and a celebration in one. The orcs surged with renewed vigor, tearing through Parademon ranks with chains, claws, and fire. Within days, the hybrid Parademons, once thought unstoppable, began to fall in droves. Their cries of rage and fury echoed across Drakthar 9, drowned beneath the laughter of orcs. By the 7th day, the last of the new breed staggered, claws bloodied, wings torn, bodies smashed against the ferrocrete runes. The orcs, relentless, dragged the carcasses into piles, hammering them into trophies and burning their remains in pyres that lit the ashen skies. At last, the battlefield fell silent, save for the crackling of fire and the laughter of those who had survived. Orcs of every size, shape, and colour swarmed over the ruins, holding up trophies of winged beasts, their heads mounted on crude poles. Warboss Gorguts roared from the highest mound, his claw dripping blood, his grin wide as the horizon. Look, boys, these demons tried to fight us, but we's are stronger. We's faster. We's better. The boys cheered, hoisting their trophies high. From the heavens, the boom tubes opened once more, but this time the orcs did not flinch. They leaned back, grinning, holding up a massive parademon head. Oi, who's the daddy now, eh? One knob shouted, laughter rolling over the plains like a storm. The boom tube crackled with a sound like a thunderclap, splitting the sky. Fire and black lightning spilled into the atmosphere as Darkseid himself stepped through. Tall, immovable, clad in black obsidian armor, his eyes smouldered like twin suns of fury. The ground seemed to tremble beneath him. The orcs froze. What the hell? Is that him? Whispered a boy, awe and curiosity tinged with glee. Warboss Gorguts, never one to fear, raised the parademon head high, laughter still roiling from his throat. Oi, we's got the fight going. This is our planet, boys. Are you their daddy? Darkseid's gaze swept the battlefield, calm, unbroken, unstoppable. His voice rolled over them like tectonic plates grinding. Kneel. The orcs erupted in laughter, bellowing their derision. Kneel? We are the war bosses now. We's the rulers. Who's gonna tell us to kneel, eh? A massive war boss, muscles corded and scarred from countless battles, stepped forward, towering even among his kind. His claw slammed against the ground, his eyes blazing. I'm the biggest. You kneel, godling, not us. Darkseid's lips curled faintly into a smile. In a single motion, his hand rising like a hammer of inevitability, he struck. The warboss's body split cleanly down the middle, from skull to pelvis, as if the universe itself had obeyed a law unknown to mortals. The laughter ceased. The boys gaped. Even the largest of orcs froze, their jaws slack, their hearts pounding in disbelief. A handful of the largest knobs and warbosses surged forward, weapons raised, their fury blazing. Darkseid did not move, his hands clasped behind his back. Omega beams lanced from his eyes in arcs of crimson annihilation, cleaving through the attackers with surgical precision. Bodies disintegrated, screaming turned to ash, and silence fell once more. The remaining orcs staggered back, their laughter gone, the fires of Drakthar 9 reflected in their wide, unblinking eyes. Darkseid's gaze swept across them, absolute, unyielding. Anyone else? His words were calm, the storm of his presence alone enough to freeze even the greenest boy. Then he raised his voice, deeper than the void itself. If it is war you desire, follow me. Follow Darkseid. For a heartbeat, the orcs hesitated. Their instinct screamed rebellion, defiance. But the thrill of battle, the taste of conquest, the fire of war in their veins, it drew them. One by one they roared. One by one they raised their weapons and fists skyward. Then the plains of Drakthar 9 erupted in unrestrained joy. Cheering, laughter, and guttural howls echoed across the ruined landscape. The orcs had found a new warboss, the ultimate warboss. Darkseid smiled faintly. The galaxy would never be the same. Above them, the skies remained blackened with smoke and fire. The boom tubes continued to pulse in the distance, waiting. The fires of the conquered world beyond still burned. The orcs of Drakthar 9 had chosen their path. Behind them, Darkseid's shadow stretched over the planet, long, unbroken, and inevitable. The first battles were over, but the war, the true infinite war, was just beginning. The green tide would follow him, the stars themselves would bleed, and in the darkness, the universe shivered at the coming storm. The stars between Ultramar and the Apokolips system were lit with the fire of war. For weeks, Chapter Master Marnius Calgar had scoured every transmission, every desperate signal, every fragment of intelligence intercepted from the outer colonies. His second company, his proud warriors, were gone, erased in a single ruthless strike. Reports were grim. Entire PDF regiments, local planetary garrisons, Even the scattered efforts of Adeptus Astartes from nearby systems had been annihilated. Planet after planet had fallen under an unknown, terrifying power. The transmissions had named it at last. Apokolips. Calgar did not flinch. Instead, he summoned his chapter. Every available company, every remaining ship, every war asset Ultramar could muster was called into service. Time was a weapon, and he would not wait while the galaxy bled beneath Apokolips's shadow. Guilliman's response had been swift. Reinforcements were approved. Additional Imperium Navy strike cruisers were mobilized, and thousands of guardsmen were conscripted into the mission. Intelligence suggested that Apokolips now controlled dozens of nearby planets, giving it near-perfect early warning systems for any incoming force. It would be a challenge unlike any the Ultramarines had faced, but Calgar welcomed it. The Imperium's citizens were being slaughtered, enslaved, and experimented upon. He would not fail them. Weeks later, the fleet emerged from the warp. 6 strike cruisers carved arcs through the void, bolters and macro lasers ready. On the bridge of the lead cruiser, Calgar stood armored in his ancient Terminator plate, his cape billowing, his eyes fixed on the blackened jewel below. His second-in-command, Captain Sicarius, approached cautiously, the weight of worry evident in his voice. "Sir, resistance appears minimal. Do we continue?" Calgar's gaze did not waver. He watched the twisted mountains and obsidian cities shimmer beneath this sunless sky. Millions of souls lay in chains below. Their cries were carried across the void in psychic echoes intercepted by their astropaths. "We do not falter," Calgar said, his voice low but thunderous. "Every being under this tyrant's boot is our duty to free. Deploy the strike forces. We bring the Emperor's fury to Apokolips." The fleet roared into action. Hundreds of dropships and assault pods were released simultaneously, engines flaring, shaking the void with fire and fury. Ultramarines in full power armor braced themselves, their jump packs flaring as they descended toward the jagged spires and smouldering plains. Below, Parademon forces erupted into motion, wings black against the darkened sky, talons glinting with unnatural strength, their snarls echoing across ruined landscapes. The first pod slammed into the obsidian plateaus of Apokolips, explosive charges detonating beneath them. Guardsmen poured out, lasguns and heavy bolters raising fire toward the descending swarms. The air shook with the impact of bolter rounds, the explosion of rocket propellant, and the sharp metallic screech of parademon claws meeting ceramite. Calgar landed at the forefront, his power sword igniting in a blue-white flare that cut through the night like lightning. His ultramarines followed, forming wedges of disciplined steel, shields locked, their bolters firing in perfect rhythm. Yet almost immediately, the scale of the threat became apparent. These were no ordinary parademons. They were faster, stronger, larger, enhanced not just with Space Marine DNA, but now Orc DNA as well, their muscles corded with unnatural strength, claws capable of tearing through steel, wings that generated shockwaves with every beat. The first wave of parademons descended upon the drop zones. An orc-tinged roar erupted from their ranks, as if some unholy fusion of savagery and cunning filled their blood. They tore through the guardsmen first, snatching troopers from cover, ripping them apart mid-air, and throwing them into obsidian spires. The Ultramarines surged forward, swords and bolters cleaving through the beasts, but every swing was met with resistance. Talons that should have shattered under power armor instead raked through chest plates, piercing ceramite in their weakest points. "Brothers, hold the line," Calgar's voice echoed through the vox. "Do not yield, not for yourselves. Fight for every soul below." The sky burned with wings and war cries. The ground shook as reinforced claws and impromptu artillery collided. Big mech-influenced parademons grabbed drop pods mid-descent, smashing them into jagged plateaus. Despite their training, the Ultramarines found themselves outmatched in moments. Each victory bought in blood, each kill replaced by 2 more. Captain Sicarius fought beside Calgar, firing a combi bolter with deadly precision, only to have a winged horror latch onto him mid-fight. The beast's claws sliced through his left pauldron and arm. He dropped, tumbling through the air, but Calgar was there in an instant, severing the parademon in 2 with a single swing of his sword. Hours passed like minutes. The surface of Apokolips became a living hell. Bolter fire ignited clouds of ash. The ground was churned into slag and blood. Guardsmen died in hundreds, flattened beneath falling parademons or impaled on jagged spires. The sky overhead was a mass of green, black, and orange, the fires of the planet reflecting against the chaos above. Calgar's formation pushed forward, hammering through the front lines. Wounded Ultramarines fought beside dying guardsmen, every kill earned through grim precision and immense courage. The Parademons were relentless, employing brutal intelligence. They adapted, coordinated, and countered with terrifying efficiency. Even bolter volleys could not break their numbers, and their hybrid strength made close combat lethal. Calgar paused on a jagged outcropping, surveying the battlefield. Smoke and ichor filled the horizon. He knew the losses were severe, but failure was not an option. Through the Vox, he sent a message to orbiting strike cruisers. "This planet, it is stronger than anticipated. We require more reinforcements. Do not wait. Send them now." As his message crackled through the void, a sinister calm fell across the battlefield. From his obsidian citadel, atop the highest spire of Apokolips, Darkseid watched, his armor gleaming under the dark fires, eyes burning like twin suns. He smiled. Darkseid bowed slightly beside him. "Now," Darkseid murmured. In that instant, the sky above Calgar's fleet in orbit erupted. Dozens of massive hulls appeared seemingly from nowhere. Orc warships, bristling with guns, rockets, and ramclaws. The green tide in space had answered its call. They struck without warning, ramming, firing, and overwhelming the Imperium cruisers. Explosions erupted. Plasma and macro cannon rounds tore through shields, and Imperium vessels shuddered under the relentless assault. Calgar looked up from the surface, his eyes narrowing beneath his helm. Vox in hand, he barked orders to the remaining strike cruisers. but the view above was terrifying. The Orc fleet, coordinated, vicious, and colossal, had ambushed them. On the surface, the Parademons pressed forward, their hybrid forms tearing through the Ultramarines and Guardsmen alike. Above, the Orc fleet now tore at the Imperial Navy's ranks, turning the heavens into a battlefield of fire and jagged metal. Calgar's sword hummed with energy as he faced down another enhanced Parademon. His shield was scorched, his armor rent, yet still, he didn't give in. This planet, he muttered into the Vox, is stronger than expected. Reinforcements must arrive now. Darkseid's laughter echoed across the void, low and vast, as he stepped fully onto his balcony. Armor catching the ashen light of the burning planet, Darkseid's grin reflected the shadows behind him. The ground trembled under the combined weight of Orc and Parademon forces. Calgar's jaw tightened, heart pounding beneath his armor. The Imperium had come to Apokolips, but the war had only just begun. The ashen plains of Apokolips were littered with the bodies of Guardsmen, their lasguns still smoking from the volley of Parademon fire. Bolter rounds roared across the planet like thunder as drop pods and landing craft continued to hammer the surface. Yet the overwhelming might of the green and black horror above and around them pressed the Imperium forces to the brink of collapse. Chapter Master Marnius Calgar stood on a fractured obsidian plateau, his Terminator armor scorched and dented from clawed strikes and explosions. Around him, his Ultramarines fired bolters in disciplined arcs, trying to hold lines that kept collapsing under the relentless onslaught. Thousands of Guardsmen were cut down in seconds by Parademons, their hybridized strength ripping squads apart like paper. Yet despite the carnage, the Space Marines' resolve did not waver, not even for a moment. Calgar's voice thundered across the Vox system, sharp and precise, cutting through the chaos. Brothers, every soul we save is a victory. Hold your ground. Advance. Strike at the heart of this darkness. The response was immediate, though measured. Bolter fire intensified, chainswords clanged against enhanced claws, and las cannons tore through obsidian spires in a desperate counterattack. Calgar's strategy was fluid. The Ultramarines began forming wedge-shaped phalanxes, staggering their attacks to force the Parademons to overextend, while squads of Guardsmen provided suppressive fire from elevated positions. It was brutal. The hybrid creatures were unlike any foes the Imperium had faced. Each Parademon towered above a normal human, their muscles pulsing with the power of Orc and Astartes' DNA. Their wings beat like hammers against the wind, creating shockwaves that toppled squads and shredded fortifications. Many Ultramarines were impaled, crushed, or torn in half before their bolters could even bark a single round. The smell of singed ceramite, smoke, and blood filled the air. Yet Calgar was not one to falter. Observing the battle, he began to analyze the Parademons' tactics. They were fast, but predictable in their predatory movements, relying on brute strength and numerical superiority. Using coordinated flanking maneuvers, micro-shielded wedges, and targeted artillery strikes from their remaining orbital platforms, Calgar began to turn the tide in pockets of the battlefield. "Formation Sigma," he roared, voice carrying over Vox and field comms. "Push forward in coordinated arcs. Strike their wings first. Force them to land. Hold your ground, brothers." The Ultramarines adapted swiftly. Swords and bolters found chinks in the Parademons' armor-like flesh. Plasma rounds seared through their wing joints, and explosive charges brought down several of the monstrous beasts. Guardsmen, inspired by Calgar's leadership, began to push back against the lesser Parademons. Though casualties still remained catastrophic. Blood pooled in craters, smoke coiled in the air, and the ground shook with each impact from armored feet or thrashing wings. For a moment, it seemed that the Imperium could regain the momentum, strategic brilliance, ferocity, and the unconquerable courage allowed Calgar's forces to slowly push forward, claiming one obsidian plateau after another. The roar of bolters and lasguns blended with the shrieks of the dying and the thunder of explosions. High above, in his obsidian citadel, atop the tallest tower of Apokolips, Darkseid's eyes burned. He observed the tide slowly shifting in favor of the Ultramarines. A thin smile traced across his lips as he turned to Darkseid. "They fight well," he murmured. "Too well. But they will learn soon enough why mortals should never challenge a god." Darkseid bowed, his lips curling in a malicious grin. "Shall we intervene, my lord?" Darkseid's hand lifted, the smallest motion carrying the weight of inevitability. "Now." Calgar's eyes scanned the horizon, noting the pockets of retreating Parademons and faltering Orc units. He was about to order another push when the first signs of catastrophe appeared. From orbit, several massive objects hurtled toward the battlefield, moving faster than any drop pod or missile. Impact zones erupted in columns of fire and smoke. Guardsmen and Ultramarines were thrown into the air as the ground beneath them fractured violently. Calgar's Vox carried his sharp command across the battlefield. "Hold! Brace! Counterattack!" But it was too late. Towering figures had descended from the sky, moving faster than reaction could allow. Steppenwolf had landed first, crashing through the front line with the force of a mountain, his great axe cleaving squads of guardsmen in a single sweep. Kalibak followed, each step shaking the ground beneath him, swinging his massive arms like a battering ram, crushing Ultramarines beneath his fists. And then Granny Goodness arrived, her superhuman speed and brutal weaponry cutting down entire squads in moments, directing Orcs and Parademons like a conductor of slaughter. The Imperium forces were utterly unprepared for the scale of this new assault. Calgar watched in horror as his wedge formations were obliterated. Entire squads of guardsmen vanished under Kalibak's strikes. Parademons now combined their Orc-inspired savagery with guidance from their generals, making each engagement more lethal than before. The battlefield became a living nightmare. Fire, ichor, and debris filled the air. Screams of men and Astartes mixed with the roars of Orc-influenced beasts. Despite the carnage, Calgar refused to yield. He rallied the remaining Ultramarines, forming a desperate defensive circle around the most vulnerable guardsmen. "Brothers," he shouted, his blade alight. "For the Emperor, do not let Apokolips take even one soul. We hold." Bolters thundered, plasma burnt the air, and chainswords roared. Yet one by one, his brothers fell. Steppenwolf's strikes were precise and merciless. Kalibak crushed entire squads beneath his fists. Granny Goodness weaved through the melee, coordinating attacks that left no margin for retreat. The remaining guardsmen were slaughtered where they stood, their numbers reduced to almost nothing. Finally, the battlefield fell silent, save for the crackle of burning obsidian and the heavy breathing of those few who remained. Calgar, bloodied and exhausted, stood with only a handful of ultramarines at his side. Chains and restraining devices appeared from the shadows, binding the surviving Space Marines. Calgar and his remaining brothers were dragged to the throne chamber within Darkseid's citadel. The black walls were slick with blood, the air thick with the scent of conquest. Darkseid approached, his presence crushing even the most stalwart hearts. "Serve me," he commanded. Calgar spat, defiance burning in his eyes. "We serve only the Emperor, never you." In an instant, an Omega beam erupted from Darkseid's eyes, obliterating one ultramarine beside him before he could blink. Calgar's voice was unyielding. "None of my men will betray the Emperor. Even now, he could crush you." Darkseid smiled, slow, deliberate, and terrifying. With a single hand, he lifted Calgar from the ground. The Space Marine's armor creaked under the pressure as the god's fingers closed around him. "Like this." Darkseid's voice was calm. With a snap of his fingers, Calgar's body was crushed like brittle steel, armor and all. In a heartbeat, Darkseid unleashed Omega beams across the remaining restrained Ultramarines. Ceramite, flesh and bone, was vaporized in a flash of crimson death, their screams ending as quickly as they began. Below, the armies of orcs and parademons erupted in ecstatic roars. The fallen Ultramarines and guardsmen had been annihilated. The field belonged to Darkseid. Darkseid approached, bowing. "My lord." "What now?" Darkseid turned his gaze to the void, his eyes reflecting the flames of the destroyed Imperium forces. "We have learned much of this galaxy's capabilities. It is time to move to the next step." He paused, his voice echoing like the doom of worlds. "And I wish to meet this Emperor they speak of." The echoes of Darkseid's voice and the victorious roars of orcs and parademons filled the void. Somewhere, far away in the Imperium, alarms screamed, but it was already too late. The shadow of Apokolips stretched further across the galaxy. The fires of Apokolips still smouldered, black smoke spiraling into the air like the breath of a dying world. The jagged spires and ashen plains were silent now, but the silence was deceptive. A calm before a storm that would consume the galaxy itself. Darkseid's gaze swept across the battlefield, From the obsidian balcony of his citadel, his black armor reflecting the dying flames of his planet below. The ground, littered with the wreckage of bolters, drop pods, and the twisted remnants of parademons and orc hybrids, bore testimony to the might of Apokolips. Below him, his armies of orcs and parademons, those augmented horrors that had slaughtered the finest warriors of the Imperium, they prepared to move. Darkseid's hand lifted slightly, and with a mere thought, the creatures halted their preparations, forming in perfect, terrifying order. Every drone, every green-skinned monstrosity, every winged terror was attuned to his will. Apokolips itself seemed to shudder in response. The planet's black mountains reflecting the power of a god whose shadow now stretched across the galaxy. For hours, he surveyed, calculating, observing. He issued no spoken command. None was needed. Each subordinate, each orc war boss and parademon general awaited only the smallest gesture from him. His gaze, sharp as a blade, penetrated the minds of strategists and soldiers alike, aligning them, bending them to his singular purpose: conquest, domination, and the imposition of order by his iron fist. Preparations were meticulous. Orc dreadnoughts were reforged with alien technologies, scavenged from the Imperium's wreckage, bolstered with psychic inhibitors to prevent rebellion from within. Parademons, bred anew with orc cunning and enhanced ferocity, were organized into strike cohorts, each trained to respond to his commands without hesitation. Warships that had been dormant, hidden in the dark reaches of Apokolips' orbital forges, powered up with engines screaming, ready to join the fleet that would take his wrath beyond the outer systems. He surveyed the staging area personally, moving through the ranks with the weight of inevitability pressing down upon all who looked at him. Even the mightiest orc warbosses cowered behind his gaze, and the parademon snarls fell silent as he passed. No one questioned, no one disobeyed. Apokolips was ready to bleed the galaxy dry. As he descended to the central chamber of the citadel, where massive observation domes allowed him to view not only the surface of Apokolips, but the entire system around it, a sudden ripple of awareness pricked at the edge of his consciousness. A voice, not spoken aloud, nor carried by vox, but psychically, unmistakably. It was clear, powerful, and infinitely familiar. Darkseid. The sound carried a weight that rivaled the immensity of a supernova. It vibrated through his mind, pushing against his own psychic presence, probing, testing. He did not flinch. Instead, he closed his eyes, feeling the presence, noting the distinct pattern of its power. "You have overstepped," the voice continued. "This is a warning, not a negotiation. Cease this invasion, or the consequences will be total." Darkseid's eyes opened, burning with the cold fire of absolute confidence. So, the humans finally speak, he thought, amusement curling in the shadows of his mind. He raised his hand, feeling the vibration of the psychic energy, and allowed the voice to manifest fully in his consciousness. Before him, projected in the void of thought, appeared a figure, immense, regal, and terrifying in its own right. The Emperor of mankind. His form radiated golden light, his visage both beautiful and horrifying, a godly aura that struck awe into even the most fearless of beings. He looked every inch the ruler of humanity, yet there was something subtly diminished, an echo of former glory rather than its full presence. The gaze, though fierce, carried the weight of eons of struggle. "You speak boldly," Darkseid's voice echoed in the Emperor's mind, resonant and deep, vibrating like tectonic plates shifting in the void. "For one so small, you carry a pride that might have been admirable once, had you been whole." The Emperor's golden eyes locked on him, unwavering. "You have no understanding of the consequences of your actions. The Imperium of man is not yours to destroy. Apokolips is anathema to all life, and I will not permit your conquest to continue." Darkseid's lips twisted into a slow, sinister smile. "Ah, the Emperor, the fabled god of man. Tell me, do you feel the weight of your empire as I feel the weight of mine? You speak as if you wield true power, but I can sense the hollowness in your form. The shell. Perhaps in your prime, this confrontation would have been worthy. Now, it is nothing more than a parlor trick." The Emperor's aura flared, pulsing like a living star. "You mistake my caution for weakness. I am the sum of millennia, the guardian of countless worlds. Cease your advance, Darkseid, or all that you know will burn beneath the fury of my Imperium." Darkseid laughed, not a laugh of mirth, but a sound like the cracking of worlds. "Do you not see, Emperor? I feel your every lie. I see through your veneer, your carefully constructed image of perfection. You are a shadow of your former power, a fractured god playing at godhood. Yet, I admire the attempt." The Emperor's psychic form tensed. "I will not be disrespected. You will regret this." "You overestimate yourself," Darkseid interrupted. His voice was calm, deliberate, but suffused with the weight of inevitability. "Your words are strong, your conviction perhaps stronger, but you are nothing. And I am absolute. A true god does not respond to the hail of a lesser being. I do not negotiate. I do not yield." The Emperor's aura flared again, a ripple of golden energy that would have incinerated 1,000 mortals, yet it seemed to pale in the presence of Darkseid's immutable certainty. "Then you leave me no choice. I will destroy you and your armies." "I do not doubt your intentions," Darkseid replied smoothly, "but I do doubt your strength. And I will see you soon, Emperor. Soon enough to teach you your place." The conversation ended not with words, but with the weight of their future pressing on them both. Darkseid's mind closed, unyielding, leaving only the echo of his promise lingering in the psychic void. Darkseid turned his attention back to Apokolips. His armies were ready. The warships, bristling with alien and stolen technologies, waited in orbit like predators circling their prey. Orc dreadnoughts, Parademons, and his generals stood ready to obey his will across light years. Entire systems would fall under the might of this meticulously crafted force. "Prepare the fleet," he commanded, his voice carrying through the citadel and resonating across the planet. "We move for terror. The galaxy will tremble beneath Apokolips's shadow. Every star, every world, every soul that defies me will be crushed." His orders were executed with precision. Ships roared to life, engines igniting, plasma vents flaring. The Parademons and Orc forces boarded their ships, hurling themselves into the gaping void, ready to carry out his absolute will. Strategic points across the outer systems were already under observation. Worlds ripe for conquest were selected, and war plans executed with mathematical perfection. Darkseid's presence was felt across the fleet. Every being, every soldier, every monster knew that the mind of a god guided them. They would not fight for honor, not for glory, not even for survival. They fought because their will was subordinate to a higher, ancient force. From the observation dome atop the citadel, Darkseid's eyes scanned the stars. Terror lay ahead, the heart of humanity, the jewel of the Imperium. He allowed himself the smallest of smiles. The Emperor had made contact, revealed his diminished state, and displayed his gilded threats. And yet, Darkseid's knowledge of true power remained absolute. "I will see him soon," he murmured. He raised his gauntleted hand toward the stars, and his fleet answered. Engines screamed, bolts of energy flared, and Apokolips, the world of black fire and endless horror, began its march toward terror. The shadow that would fall upon humanity was imminent, total, and unstoppable. The golden light of the Emperor's throne barely pierced the gloom of the Imperium's heart. The palace on Terra was alive with a tense urgency, banners rippling in the artificial wind of the vast hallways, weapons clanging against polished stone as the custodes moved with preternatural precision. Rabute Gilliman stood at the apex of the central chamber, the weight of a galaxy on his shoulders. He did not speak aloud. Words were unnecessary. His thoughts swirled in the Emperor's mind, a private, mental communion that no one else could breach. The Emperor spoke, his form still and radiant, yet Gilliman could sense the threads of worry beneath the golden mask of serenity. Every second that passed carried the threat of a new horror, and Gilliman's expression darkened. He did not vocalize the Emperor's responses. The words remained locked in their psychic connection, but the concern was visible in the arch of his brow, the subtle tenseness of his jaw. "I understand," Gilliman murmured, though it was almost lost in the ambient hum of the palace. "We will make preparations immediately." Without hesitation, he pivoted sharply, the polished armor of the Primarch catching the light as he barked orders across the chamber. "Custodes, raise every defensive perimeter, prepare the planetary batteries, alert the fleet in orbit, all sectors on high alert." His voice carried the steel of command, and the Golden Warriors responded instantly, moving with the precise, lethal efficiency for which the Emperor's Guard was famed. Every step, every motion was coordinated, rehearsed, and deadly. Yet Guilliman's eyes, golden green and piercing, lifted to the sky beyond the palace. His mutter was almost a whisper, meant only for himself. "It is too late." And then it began. The first rupture tore the sky asunder, a shimmering, jagged wound appearing above the equatorial orbit. Boom tubes, those impossible gateways of Apokolips, sliced through the stratosphere, rending the atmosphere with the scream of 1,000 worlds. Guilliman's heart clenched as his eyes registered the first vessels emerging from the darkness. Darkseid's fleet, massive beyond comprehension, roared through the void. Terra's orbital defense array, the pride of the battle fleet, had seconds to react, and those seconds were brutally insufficient. Gigantic warships of alien origin, bristling with orc armaments and parademon weapons, swept through the fleet's lines like scythes through wheat. Thunderhawk gunships attempted intercept, but were shredded mid-flight. Lances and turbo lasers erupted against the invaders, and yet every strike seemed almost trivial compared to the raw firepower descending from the apocalyptic armada. Guilliman's mind raced. He tried to issue coordination orders psychically, attempting to guide squadrons and orbital batteries in unison, but even the most disciplined formations were sliced apart with horrifying brutality. Explosions blossomed in orbit, turning proud vessels into burning meteors. Entire cruisers were torn in half by the combined onslaught of Darkseid's fleet and the devastating energy signatures that the warships emitted. "Evasive maneuvers," Guilliman shouted, his voice cutting through the chambers. "Pull the remaining ships back, focus fire on the incoming," but it was too late. The shockwave of destruction from boom tubes hammered the palace, shattering observation domes and sending alarms screaming across Terra. The battle fleet faltered. Every attempt at a counterattack was met with annihilation. Guilliman's jaw tightened. This is only the beginning," he muttered. Guilliman's fears were confirmed moments later. Across the horizon, another boom tube tore open, this time not in orbit, but at the very gates of the Imperial Palace. Custodes scrambled instantly, forming defensive positions, their spears and blades glinting in the dim emergency lighting. The air thrummed with tension, the scent of ozone and hot ceramite filling the halls. Through the swirling blue and black portal, he saw him. Darkseid, walking, calm, absolute, the figure of a god among mortals, each step leaving the ground quivering, the walls rattling, and the Custodes faltering just slightly under the weight of the aura radiating from him. Guilliman's breath hitched. He knew immediately. This was the true strike. The fleet, the orbital destruction, the chaos. It had all been a distraction. Now the apex predator walked where the heart of the Imperium lay. The Custodes rushed to intercept. Spears thrust, swords swung, and energy blades flared. The Golden Warriors moved with lethal coordination, but every strike was met with a preternatural, almost bored precision. Darkseid did not dodge in panic. He moved like inevitability. A Custodes spear impaled the side of Darkseid's armor. He turned, a single motion of his gauntlet snapping the Golden Warrior in half like a twig. Omega beams shot from his eyes, searing through ceramite and flesh, reducing squads of Custodes to ash mid-attack. Every attempt to stop him was met with impossible force. Punches, kicks, and psychic pressure that crushed mind and body alike. The corridors and steps before the palace gates became a river of fire, blood, and shattered armor. The Custodes fell in minutes. One by one, the mightiest warriors of terror obliterated under a god's wrath. Not one could stand, not one could resist. With the golden halls cleared, Darkseid approached the throne room, the echoes of the slaughter behind him. Guilliman stood at the forefront, his sword drawn, his face grim but resolute. The Emperor on the throne radiated that blinding, silent light of divinity, untouched by the devastation, yet aware of everything. Darkseid's gaze fixed upon the Emperor, unflinching, unyielding. Guilliman stepped forward, charging with all the force of a Primarch's might, his blade aimed with deadly precision. But Darkseid did not even fully turn to meet the strike. With an almost lazy sidestep, he dodged, his movement impossibly fast, his reflexes beyond comprehension. Guilliman's sword swung harmlessly past him, and before he could react, Darkseid's hand shot out, wrapping around Guilliman's throat. The blue and gold armor of the Primarch groaned, his muscles straining, but the god's grip did not relent. Guilliman's eyes widened, a flash of panic crossing his face. He could scream, could strike, could call for aid, but none of it mattered. Darkseid's strength was absolute, suffocating. The Omega beams behind his eyes glimmered as he tightened, each movement deliberate, a silent threat to the Emperor watching. Guilliman's feet left the ground, flailing, desperate, but nothing could save him. With one final squeeze, the Primarch's life was extinguished. His body went limp, dropping to the floor with a resounding crash that echoed across the throne hall. Darkseid stepped over the dead Primarch, his boots crunching the shattered stone beneath him. His eyes were locked entirely on the Emperor. Every step was measured and terrifyingly deliberate. There was no hesitation. There was no mercy. The throne room was silent, save for the subtle hum of the Emperor's light, brilliant yet restrained, and the cold approach of the god who had just slaughtered the greatest mortal warrior alive. Darkseid raised a hand. The air trembled. The shadows of Apokolips stretched into the golden hall, and he stopped, mere meters from the throne. His gaze never wavered from the Emperor. A smile, slow and terrible, traced his lips. It was a predator acknowledging his prey. The galaxy outside Terra burned. The fleets in orbit were shattered, and Apokolips's shadow now touched the very heart of humanity. Darkseid had arrived, and he had come to claim dominion over all that lived. The Emperor remained on the Golden Throne. The weight of eternity and eons of battle pressed around him. But even as Darkseid stood at his feet, the glow of the God Emperor did not waver. And thus in the heart of Terra, in the throne room of the mightiest human empire ever forged, the ultimate confrontation hung in the air. Darkseid, unchallenged, eyes blazing with the promise of death and conquest. The Emperor, the final light of mankind, serene yet aware of the terror before him. The endgame had begun. The throne room of the Imperial Palace was a cathedral of silence. The air trembled from the echoes of slaughter. The crash of Guilliman's body still reverberated against the marble and gold, each fading tremor a cruel reminder of the futility of defiance. The Custodes were dead. The Primarch was gone. All that remained was the Emperor, seated, immobile upon the golden throne, his light blazing, but faintly, like the last rays of a sun before twilight. Darkseid approached with steps that could have been the ticking of fate itself. Each movement was deliberate, each stride inevitable, the pressure of his aura cracking marble tiles beneath him. His shadow swallowed the gilded mosaics of saints and angels, leaving only void in its wake. He stepped to the foot of the throne. The Emperor's aura shimmered like molten gold, radiating the strength of a god bound by eternity. Yet Darkseid's expression was one of cruel amusement. He leaned forward, his vast frame looming until his face was mere inches from the radiant figure of the Emperor. The air grew sharp, metallic. Darkseid inhaled deeply, deliberately. His nostrils flared. Then he froze. A flicker of disdain crossed his granite features. His lips curled back into something close to revulsion, a predator disgusted by the scent of rot in its prey. The words never needed to be spoken. The sneer alone was enough. The Emperor, mighty, golden, revered, was nothing but a corpse kept alive by machinery and worship. Darkseid straightened, his crimson eyes narrowing. "Rot," he murmured at last, the word echoing like a death knell. With a single, contemptuous motion, he reached forward. His gauntleted hand clamped around the Emperor's withered body, ripping it free of the throne's life-sustaining cables and golden machinery. Sparks and streams of psychic energy crackled wildly, the chamber screaming in protest as the Emperor was torn from his prison. For the first time in 10 millennia, the God Emperor's body was free and vulnerable. The Emperor's eyes, twin suns of burning will, flared brighter than they had in centuries. A wave of psychic power rolled outward, rattling the stones, cracking the pillars, and shattering stained glass windows into cascading light. But it was not enough to throw Darkseid back. But it was enough to stall him for a moment. Darkseid's response was merciless. His eyes ignited. Twin beams of raw, crimson Omega energy lanced out, striking the Emperor's chest. The golden throne shuddered. The sigils of humanity's last hope were flickering. For a moment, the Emperor's psychic aura held, golden fire clashing against red annihilation. Seconds passed. The Emperor's will, vast and immeasurable, fought back. His golden form glowed brighter. Golden wings of light unfurled, halos of energy spiraling outward. He resisted. He endured. For those brief, endless heartbeats, it was as though he might push the darkness back. Darkseid's brow furrowed. His beams intensified. The air warped. The walls began to melt. His lips drew back in effort as he poured more of his eternal essence into the Omega effect. The Emperor screamed, not with sound, but with a psychic roar that shook every mortal soul on Terra, a cry that carried both fury and despair. For an instant, the galaxy itself seemed to pause. And then, slowly, the light began to falter. The golden aura sputtered. The Emperor's form cracked, splintered, and then disintegrated. Ash drifted down where once a god had sat. Only the faintest shimmer of golden dust remained, vanishing into the void of eternity. Darkseid lowered his gaze, the crimson glow of his Omega beams fading, his lips curving into a slow, sinister smile. "Not bad," he muttered. The God Emperor of mankind was no more. Darkseid turned and with measured calm sat himself upon the golden throne. The iron inevitability of the act reverberated through the palace, through the Imperium, through the warp. He leaned back, granite hands resting on the throne's arms, and then he laughed. A deep, resonant laugh that shook the foundations of the palace. But the laughter did not go unanswered. Above Terra, the heavens ruptured. Warp rifts bloomed like malignant flowers, their screaming maws spilling forth the hordes of chaos. Demons of Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh clawed their way into reality, their howls reverberating with madness. Warships bearing the 8-pointed star of chaos tore through the veil, pouring legions of traitor marines and corrupted titans into orbit. The death of the Emperor had broken the seal. The floodgates were open. Terror was theirs to feast upon. The throne room shook with the tremor of a warp incursion, and the sound of demonic laughter echoed across the golden halls. Darkseid rose, slowly, majestically. His body expanded, growing, towering until his head burst through the ceiling. He was no longer merely a giant among men. He was a god, showing his true form. With a casual backhand he struck. An entire chaos battle barge, kilometers long, disintegrated into wreckage and fire, swatted from the heavens like a gnat. Demons hurled themselves at him, screeching, their claws and fangs dripping warp venom. Darkseid's Omega beams flared, weaving and curving through the air, annihilating thousands in an instant, their screams cut short as they were erased from existence. The warp howled in protest. Armies poured forth endlessly, rivers of demons flooding the skies and streets. But Darkseid only smiled, his eyes blazing. Every blast of his Omega beams shredded titans of flesh and brass. He split warships in half and banished demonic lords back into the Imperium. The chaos onslaught wavered. What had been a flood became a faltering tide. In moments, the vast armies of the warp recoiled, shrieking, dragged back into the rifts from which they came. The sky sealed itself with a final reluctant scream. Darkseid stood triumphant upon Terra, his voice carried into the Imperium itself, reaching the thrones of the Chaos Gods. "Wait your turn," he declared, his words vibrating across eternity. "It will come soon enough. The Chaos Gods, immortal, insane, eternal, fell silent. Darkseid returned to his normal size, descending once more to the throne, each step deliberate, each motion the act of one who has already claimed victory. His generals approached, his parademon commanders, his orc war bosses bound in chains of psychic obedience, and his lieutenants of Apokolips, bred only for war. They knelt. "My lord," one intoned, "the planet is yours. The defenses are broken. The fleet is shattered. Our forces sweep the hives, the temples, the factories. Yet, resistance remains. These Imperium soldiers fight still." Darkseid regarded him, the faintest flicker of amusement crossing his face. "Of course they do. It is what they are bred for. What else could be expected of cattle who believe themselves lions?" Another general spoke up. "Shall we crush them swiftly, my lord? Burn them where they stand?" Darkseid shook his head. His voice was calm, his tone absolute. "No. They wish to fight until the last man. Let them. Indulge their request. Strip them of hope. Bleed them of pride. Grind them down until only one remains. And when that final ember flickers, take him alive. He will serve as a monument to their futility." The generals bowed. Their wills were broken to his command. Darkseid ascended the steps once more and seated himself upon the golden throne. Where once mankind's god and ruler had sat for 10,000 years, Darkseid now ruled. His granite hands gripped the armrest, his crimson eyes burned into the void, and his lips curled into the faintest of smiles. Around him, the Imperium burned. The hives collapsed into ruin. The fleets burning in orbit. The defenders fought and died in droves, their blood staining the soil of their cradle world. And above it all, Darkseid planned. For Terra was no longer the throne world of humanity. It was the capital of Apokolips reborn. And this was only the beginning. Darkseid leaned back in his throne, his gaze piercing the endless dark of the void beyond the palace walls. His laughter rumbled once more. The game of gods had only begun, and all would bow in time. The galaxy trembled. Apokolips reigned. Months had passed since the throne of Ash. Months since the Emperor of Mankind, the undying corpse god who had held humanity together for 10,000 years, had been torn from his seat by Darkseid and reduced to drifting motes of ash. The galaxy reeled. Warp travel, the fragile lifeline of the Imperium, had collapsed. The Astronomicon had gutted out with its master's death, leaving the stars silent and cold. Where once fleets could cross the void with certainty, now ships vanished into storms, torn apart by demons, lost forever in the shifting tides of the Imperium. Entire sectors were severed from one another, planetary governors cut adrift, armies were stranded, worlds abandoned. Civilization had cracked. What had been one Imperium was once again shattered into 1,000 scattered fragments. And in this chaos, Darkseid thrived. From Terra, now reforged into the capital of Apokolips, the warlord spread his dominion across the void. his armies. Parademon hybrids of Astartes and Orc DNA descended on Imperium worlds like storms of fire. Hive-cities that had stood for millennia were burned in hours. Manufactorums that had supplied the Imperial Guard for generations now forged weapons stamped with the sigil of Apokolips. These parademon hybrids swept across the stars. Some bore the twisted visages of former Astartes, their gene seed corrupted. Others were bred entirely new, abominations hatched in pits of nightmare science and warp alchemy. They were legion, and they obeyed only Darkseid's word. Hundreds of planets had fallen, and the Tau, once proud in their fragile but growing empire, were obliterated. The empire of the greater good lasted only weeks under the iron hand of Apokolips. Darkseid's fleets, vast black monoliths that glowed with crimson fire, had descended without warning. Kroot mercenaries burned in their forests, their entire species hunted to near extinction in days. Tau fire warriors fought with discipline and bravery, their pulse rifles blazing, their battlesuits dancing through skies of fire. But it was not enough. For every cadre destroyed, Darkseid unleashed 100 more parademons. For every battlesuit crushed beneath fire and rail rounds, he answered with omega beams that carved through the sky and unmade them. The ethereals, the spiritual heart of the Tau, were dragged in chains before him. They spoke of unity, of peace. Darkseid listened. Then he crushed their throats in his fists, one by one, until the last voice of the greater good fell silent. The Tau were broken. Their colonies turned to factories, their people enslaved. The blue-skinned Xenos now toiled as workers, soldiers, and sacrifices for Apokolips. Their empire was gone. But not all was conquest. Beyond the Outer Rim, the Tyranids came. Hive fleet tendrils, drawn by the psychic scream of the Emperor's death, had poured into the galaxy in unprecedented numbers. Their shadow blotted out the stars. Their claws ripped entire systems into biomass. And there, on the bleeding edge of space, Darkseid's hybrids had met them. Parademon swarms clashed with Tyranid hordes in endless slaughter. Gaunt met Talon. Hive tyrants ripped apart winged monstrosities, even as their skulls were split in Darkseid's name. Warships of Apokolips, bristling with annihilation cannons, scoured the void with fire. But the Tyranids adapted, their carapace thickening, their swarms learning. The war was attritional, unending, brutal. For the first time since his conquest began, Darkseid had found resistance that could not be crushed in a single stroke. But still he endured, for his will was absolute. Elsewhere, in the deep tombs of the galaxy, another force had awoken. The Necrons, disturbed by the psychic shockwave of the Emperor's death and the collapse of warp travel, had stirred in greater numbers than ever before. Tomb worlds flared to life across the stars, green fires igniting as entire dynasties roused from eons of slumber. The galaxy shifted again. Darkseid knew this could not be ignored, so he sought them out. The tomb world was cold and silent, Great pylons stretched into the black skies, their tips sparking with eldritch light. At the heart of it stood the Necron host, rank upon rank of skeletal warriors, their Gauss rifles glowing with viridian power. At their head stood an overlord, his body a polished frame of necrodermis, his crown etched with dynastic sigils. His eyes burned with green fire, his bearing one of ancient pride. Darkseid descended into their midst without fear. His footsteps cracked the stone. His presence was a weight upon reality. "I am Darkseid," he said, his voice reverberating like thunder across the tomb. "Kneel, and you will be spared." The Overlord tilted his head, the faintest flicker of contempt in the mechanical tilt of his jaw. He raised his staff. The Necron phalanx opened fire. Thousands of Gauss beams cut through the air, their disintegration rays stripping flesh from existence, atom by atom. The ground blazed with green fury, the sky itself glowing green from the storm. But when it cleared, Darkseid still stood. His granite flesh was untouched. His eyes glowed red with fury. "How dare you?" he snarled. In an instant he was among them. His hands, vast and unstoppable, ripped through warriors like parchment. He seized the Overlord by the throat, crushing the necrodermis like brittle glass, shattering the crown, tearing the ancient machine god apart with his bare hands. The Necrons fell back, but their retreat was met with omega beams that carved through their ranks, erasing them entirely. Darkseid stood amidst their ruin, his rage echoing. "You will serve, or you will perish. There is no third path." And yet, in the shadow of his reign, a light stirred. Far across the galaxy, beyond the grasp of terror and Apokolips, a system of human worlds endured, guarded by void fleets cobbled together from a dozen shattered sectors, defended by bastions rebuilt from scavenged ruin. It was a fragile bastion of resistance. Its heart was Caliban reborn, and its master was the Lion. Lion L. Johnson, Primarch returned, had carved some order from the chaos. A handful of surviving Space Marine chapters, battered remnants of once mighty brotherhoods, had gathered to him. The Crimson Fists, broken but unyielding. The scythes of the Emperor, few in number but hardened by war. The Black Templars, crusading still. Even fragments of the Ultramarines, lost in the warp but now rallied to his banner. Here, the Lion forged something new. A bulwark, a chance, a plan. In the great War Council chamber, beneath banners of 100 broken chapters, the Lion stood. His armor was scarred, his blade drawn, his mane of hair shadowing a face carved with unbending will. Around him stood chapter masters, scarred generals, men and women who had lost everything, but had refused to yield. They spoke of Darkseid, of Apokolips, of the enslaved Tau, the shattered Imperium, the endless tides of Tyranids and Necrons. "Humanity teeters on the edge of annihilation," one general said. "The Emperor is gone. There is no beacon, no unity, no hope." The Lion raised a hand. Silence fell. His eyes burned with certainty. "He is not gone," the Primarch said at last. Murmurs swept the chamber. "My lord?" The Lion's gaze was distant. "I have spoken to him. In the silence of the warp, beyond the veil of death, I heard his voice. The Emperor endures, and he will return." The generals bowed their heads. For the first time in months, hope flickered in their hearts. The Lion held up his sword, the blade gleaming in the chamber's light. "But until that day, we fight. We fight for every world, for every soul, every scrap of humanity not yet in chains. For when he returns, we will be ready to strike." The chamber erupted in thunderous oaths. Far away, Darkseid sat upon the golden throne of terror, crimson eyes blazing into the void. His laughter echoed still. But across the galaxy, in the Lion's fortress, a new fire had been lit. The galaxy trembled on a knife's edge. Apokolips reigned, but hope endured.